Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested talks aimed at ending the war in Iran could resume over the next 2 days, after negotiations collapsed over the weekend. Meanwhile, Israel and Lebanon held their first direct diplomatic talks in more than 3 decades in Washington, aimed at securing a ceasefire. Despite the U.S. blockade of maritime traffic entering and leaving Iranian ports, U.S.-sanctioned ships, including a Chinese tanker, passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkiye are expected to hold talks in the coming days, focused on ending the U.S.-Iran conflict and reopening the critical waterway. The IMF has downgraded its outlook for the global economy due to the ongoing situation in the Middle East. But it maintains South Korea's 2026 economic growth forecast at 1.9%, unchanged from its projection in January. We begin this morning with U.S. President Donald Trump hinting that a second round of peace talks between the United States and Iran could resume over the next 2 days. Meanwhile, Israel and Lebanon held their first direct talks on a peace agreement in Washington. Our Cho Young-eun starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that a second round of talks between the United States and Iran could be happening over the next 2 days. Trump initially told the New York Post in an interview that the talks would likely take place in Pakistan. He added that Pakistan's army chief was doing an excellent job in facilitating the talks. The remarks come after the first round of the peace talks over the weekend ended without an agreement, with Iran's nuclear ambitions remaining a key sticking point for Washington. Trump also said he did not support reports that the U.S. has proposed a 20-year suspension of Iran's nuclear activity, emphasizing that he favors a permanent ban on enrichment. Meanwhile, Israel and Lebanon held their first direct diplomatic talks in decades in Washington on Tuesday. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who took part in the meeting, called it a historic opportunity to end the influence of Hezbollah in the region. The talks, which lasted for more than 2 hours, were aimed at securing a ceasefire amid ongoing cross-border fighting.
This is about bringing a permanent end to 20 or 30 years of Hezbollah's influence in this part of the world, and not just the damage it's inflicted on Israel, the damage it's inflicted on the Lebanese people. We have to remember the Lebanese people.
Israel's ambassador to the U.S. said the talks showed that Israel and Lebanon are on the same side, and that the two countries are both united in liberating Lebanon from an occupation power dominated by Iran called Hezbollah. He added that the talks would continue within weeks, while the Lebanese ambassador said they were productive. The U.S. State Department also released a statement after the meeting, saying the two sides had productive discussions, and the meeting marked progress toward further direct negotiations. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
Tensions are rising in the Strait of Hormuz as U.S.-sanctioned tankers continue to transit despite a blockade ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump. Regional powers are now pushing for talks, warning the standoff could escalate and threaten global energy shipping routes. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
A U.S.-sanctioned Chinese tanker has tested President Donald Trump's new blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, successfully passing through the strategic corridor on Monday. The vessel, identified as the Rich Starry, traveled through the strait into the Gulf of Oman in its second attempt, according to shipping data. The tanker, carrying roughly 250,000 barrels of methanol, flies under a Malawi flag, though authorities there say it is not officially registered. Reports indicate the ship has a Chinese crew on board. The transit comes as the United States began enforcing a naval blockade aimed at restricting Iranian oil exports. Under the policy, U.S. forces are blocking access to Iranian ports and intercepting vessels suspected of paying tolls to Tehran. A second U.S.-sanctioned Chinese tanker also passed through the strait from the opposite direction and is now in the Persian Gulf, reportedly en route to Iraq to load fuel later this week. Beijing has strongly condemned the blockade, calling it irresponsible and dangerous. China's foreign ministry warned the move could undermine an already fragile ceasefire and further threaten the safety of ships navigating one of the world's most critical energy corridors. Despite the heightened tensions, maritime traffic through the strait continues. According to U.S. officials cited by the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, more than 20 merchant vessels, including cargo ships, container ships, and tankers, have passed through the waterway in the past 24 hours. Some ships reportedly turned off their tracking transponders in an effort to reduce the risk of potential Iranian attacks. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is reportedly urging Washington to halt the blockade and return to negotiations with Iran, fearing the move could trigger broader escalation. Saudi officials warned that Tehran could retaliate by targeting other vital choke points, including the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a key route for Saudi oil exports to the Red Sea. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts are gaining momentum. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkiye are expected to hold talks in the coming days, focused on ending the U.S.-Iran conflict and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. According to AFP on Tuesday, the foreign ministers of the four countries plan to meet on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, scheduled for April 17th to 19th in Turkiye. The meeting would mark their third round of discussions on broader regional issues, following a gathering in Islamabad late last month, where the Strait of Hormuz was also a central topic. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And now for a closer look at where the war in the Middle East is headed, we're joined today by Elif, news presenter on A News. Elif, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
So you've been covering diplomacy and geopolitics in Turkey for years, right? With the Iran war now in its 7th week, how is it, directly affecting countries across the Middle East?
Well, Anjay, let's start by saying that, of course, the countries in the Middle East are in the most affected situation. But when we talk about a war like that, a regional situation like that, it is really hard to say that only the Middle East is affected, only the West, only the East is affected. We're talking about the reflection upon all world, because we are talking about Strait of Hormuz, we're talking about the regional stability, we are talking about the world markets and global situations that is unfolding. When we look at it in the broader perspective, we know that this kind of situations, these kind of regional conflicts that are unfolding is everyone's problem. So when we continue talking about this in a diplomatic level, of course, that technically we are talking about something between Iran and the United States, but is also, as your news packages goes, something about Lebanon and Israel and Yemen and Qatar and all the Gulf countries that has been affected about this situation so far. Through the Strait of Hormuz, it has affected all of the world, from the trade situation, from the finances, from the fact that oil prices went skyrocketing in the last 47 days. So the question is here is that, can it continue for another 47 days? It can. Can the world afford it at the moment, especially after going through so many stuff at the same time? It is the question that we are trying to unfold as it comes.
Right, absolutely. And the standoff surrounding that Strait of Hormuz is intensifying, and the U.S. military claimed that it has begun to enforce a blockade of Iranian ports. What do you make of these latest developments?
Well, some of the analysts that we have been talking with are saying that this is just retaliation after retaliation. Iran's retaliation was blocking Strait of Hormuz and affecting the barrel prices that now we are talking about above $100. A couple months ago, if somebody told us, even us journalists, we would be like, it is probably impossible to have barrel prices up to something above to $100, and we can see another daylight after that. But now we are facing this reality. This was because of the retaliation that has been taken for the Strait of Hormuz. Now we have United States, the Trump administration. We know that in the diplomatic situations, Trump administration hasn't been what the other U.S. administrations have been. So we knew that they were going to take some different initiatives, but it is a little bit more impulsive than the previous administration. So we never know that what kind of retaliations that they're going to take. This was one of the retaliations that we are seeing at the moment. Now, is it going to affect the reflections about on the Middle East? Of course, it is going to. We have a couple of thoughts that it's really important for the movement in the region. But again, the same question. 47 days it has been, and can we afford it for a timeless moment? Can we afford it in another 47 days, if not more? With the ports being blocked and still talking about ceasefire, this is a little bit interesting. This is something that we all just really watching closely, because as you know, like in the last weekend, we were thinking that some ceasefire negotiations, some end of the war remarks are going to come up. Of course, it didn't end up as the people in the world were hoping, because we couldn't find a middle ground. They couldn't find a middle ground in between. We knew about that. So now the interesting thing is that the US administration is saying they're still open to the ceasefire, but they are still going to take the retaliation. Can it be realistic? Again, we're going to watch on that.
Right, and like you just mentioned, peace talks between the U.S. and Iran failed over the weekend, and President Donald Trump is now hinting at a new round of talks, possibly in Pakistan, because Pakistan is racing to bring the two sides together. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, Pakistan is really interesting actor. When you look at Pakistan, about the previous initiatives, they were really applauded all around the world. Internationally, people were really pleased by the initiatives that they were trying to take on the conflicts like that. But looking at Pakistan, looking at their inner politics, we know that Pakistan is in odds itself as well. We know that they are in a war with Kabul, and this conflict that has been continuing for a while. And at home, they have a reflection. It's like 47 days ago, we have been talking about can it be the real thing that we are going to talk about in the next couple of weeks? We were thinking that Kabul and Pakistan, Kabul and Islamabad having their clashes, being in odds with each other is going to be the new thing that is in the region that we are going to talk about for so many times. And then this war happened, and then the Iran-US retaliation alongside with Israel has happened. And then we started talking about it more, and this came into the sidelines. Now, as your news package goes, we have been talking about the diplomatic ways, and Turkiye is one of the partners that is trying to take initiatives in this situation, knowing that its unique regional stance on the area. And also the Antalya Diplomacy Forum is going to take on in the later this month, and it is going to be an open table for the people of Turkey and people of other countries to be able to communicate about how they can unfold this situation rather than in field, just do it on the table. Is it going to be possible? Of course, it is going to be more concrete after we hear the talks, but it is, again, something the whole world is going to watch closely.
Right, and Leif, before I let you go, Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors to the United States met in Washington, and this was the two countries' first direct talks since 1993. How could the talks possibly impact the course of this war going forward?
Well, as far as diplomacy goes, let's take a look at it in two different directions. First, the fact that they have met after so many years, tens of years, in 1993. They have met since they haven't been met before since 1993. So when we talk about in that perspective, even the sole fact that they came together is an important thing for the optics. It is an important thing to see on the screens in this millennium that these two parts are meeting together. So this is the positive side. But when we talk about the realistic situation that can reflect on the field, when we talk about something concrete is going to happen or not, the option is a little bit more narrow than it seems. Why is that? Because let's take a look that Donald Trump was saying that this meeting is going to be open, direct, and high level, and first such bilateral engagement since 1993. This is all true. But also, we are talking about two different sides that want two different things. On one end, we have Lebanon, and they're asking for ceasefire, and they want the situation to be finished entirely. And on the other hand, we have Israel, whose aggression has been continuing all around the Middle East. Some analysts are even calling the Iran war Israel's war rather than United States war, because the odds with Tehran and Tel Aviv has been really high when we consider all of these. So when we consider what they have with Lebanon, it is also something that they want the Hezbollah to just disarm. So is it something that they're looking for a ceasefire, or is it just something that they're trying to make sure that they have more land, they have more take on the Middle East? It leans to the second one. And under these circumstances, is Lebanon going to accept this and agree what Israel wants without even having a ceasefire? It seems unlikely. So this is the negative parts of the situations. But of course, regardless of what is going to happen, in the world of diplomacy, optics are really important. And the fact that these two parties have gathered together is itself says a lot about what is going to happen in the world's diplomacy. But surely there's so much to cover and so little time to talk about. So this is what is being going on in overall situation.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Leif, thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
The IMF has downgraded its outlook for the global economy due to the ongoing situation in the Middle East. However, it maintained its forecast for South Korea made in January, pre-Operation Epic Fury, citing the help provided by a supplementary budget, as well as the boom in chip exports. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
In its April World Economic Outlook released on Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund maintained South Korea's 2026 economic growth forecast at 1.9%. The figure remains unchanged from its January projection, standing firm despite a downgraded outlook for the global economy. South Korea's inflation rate for the year was projected at 2.5%. The IMF and the South Korean government note that while downward pressures persist from rising energy prices linked to the Middle East conflict, robust exports and the swift execution of a 26.2 trillion won or roughly $19 billion supplementary budget have cushioned the impact. Globally, the economic picture is darkening. The IMF lowered its 2026 global growth forecast to 3.1%, down 0.2 percentage points from its January projection. The agency cited a combination of surging energy prices, rising inflation expectations, and a flight from risk in financial markets as testing the global economy once again. Looking at individual economies, the Eurozone's growth outlook was cut by 0.2 percentage points to 1.1%, weighed down by the cumulative burden of energy costs. The U.S. economy also saw a slight downward revision to 2.3%. The most severe impact is concentrated in the Middle East and Central Asia, where direct disruptions to energy exports caused a sharp 2.0 percentage point plunge, bringing growth down to just 1.9%. The IMF assesses that downside risks continue to dominate, particularly supply chain disruptions from the prolonged war, and advises governments to prioritize price stability and maintain fiscal soundness. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Import prices in South Korea surged in March, posting their sharpest increase in more than 28 years, driven by soaring global oil prices amid the Middle East conflict. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Wednesday show the import price index jumped 16.1% on month, accelerating sharply from a 1.5% rise in February. It marks the steepest increase since January 1998 and the 9th consecutive monthly gain since July of last year. On a yearly basis, import prices climbed 18.4%. The surge was largely fueled by a spike in Dubai crude, South Korea's benchmark, which soared nearly 88% on month to $128.52 per barrel in March. A weakening Korean won against the U.S. dollar has also added to import costs, compounding inflationary pressures for the economy.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump's son, Eric Trump, who oversees the Trump family business empire, will accompany his father on a state visit to China next month. The White House is calling the trip personal, but critics are raising concerns over conflicts of interest. The Trump Organization spokeswoman said Eric Trump and his wife will join the May 14th to 15th visit in a personal capacity, and that Eric has no business ventures in China and will not participate in any private meetings. The trip is the first by a U.S. president to China in 8 years and is aimed at stabilizing relations between the world's two largest economies. Eric's appearance on the trip drew scrutiny as he serves as Chief Strategy Officer of American Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency mining venture with ties to Chinese equipment maker Bitmine. President Trump's nominee to lead the Federal Reserve, Kevin Warsh, has disclosed assets worth well over $100 million, putting him on track to become the wealthiest Fed chair in history. Warsh's financial disclosure on Tuesday reveals two investments worth more than $50 million each, along with dozens of holdings in artificial intelligence and crypto, many of which he has pledged to divest to comply with strict Fed ethics rules. His spouse, Jane Lauder, of the Estee Lauder family, holds an estimated almost $2 billion in assets. Warsh has his confirmation hearing on April 21st, but Republican Senator Tom Tillis has vowed to block the confirmation until an investigation into current Fed Chair Jerome Powell concludes. Powell's term ends May 15th. In Turkiye, a 19-year-old former student opened fire at a high school on Tuesday, wounding at least 16 people before killing himself as police moved in to apprehend him. The attack in the southeastern province of Sanliurfa saw the gunman open fire in the schoolyard before moving inside the building. 10 students, 4 teachers, 1 police officer, and a canteen employee were among the wounded. As of Tuesday, 1 teacher remains in serious condition. U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday turned on Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, one of his closest European allies, saying he was shocked by her and that she would lack the courage he thought she had. Trump accused Meloni of refusing to support U.S. efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and expecting America to do the job for her. This follows Meloni's comments on Monday, where she publicly called Trump's attack on Pope Leo unacceptable. Meloni on Tuesday also suspended a military cooperation pact with Israel.
If you're visiting the capital area from last week, hope you're adjusting all right to the wild temperature swings. I mean, it was only a week ago we had to take out our winter jackets again, but it has been t-shirt weather this week. And yesterday, in fact, was the warmest day of the season in the capital at a high of 28 degrees Celsius, and early summer heat will continue through tomorrow. However, unlike yesterday, air quality will be an issue, especially in the capital area, with bad air quality expected throughout the day today. Meanwhile, the East Coast continues to stay much cooler today. Busan and Gyeongju will be getting up to 21 degrees Celsius, Seoul topping out at 26 degrees under sunny skies nationwide. But UV rays are stronger now, so have your sun protection ready. Rain is expected on Friday across the southern regions in Jeju, which will briefly ease the heat. But after that, temperatures are set to climb again over the weekend.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.